Okay, it's time to fix up the nav. This is what it currently looks like, and this is what it's supposed to look like. It's supposed to go horizontally with that background color on. Okay, so just to review what's going on currently, we have some list items. If I were to put a background color on the list item, just one of them to show you. So the list items are block elements, which means that even though the text ends here, the element itself extends to the whole side of the page. So that's why they're going under each other by default. It's the definition of what a block element does. The nav is the parent of everything, and that is what has that sort of salmon colored background color on there. And then, of course, all of these LIs are in a UL together. In order to get them to go next to each other rather than under each other, we need to pull each of the LIs out of the normal document flow so they behave a little differently. And we're going to do that using a property called float. If you haven't watched the video link that is the 3D visualization of what happens when you float in Clear, I suggest stopping this video now and going and having a look at that other video, because it will give you a really nice visual of what we're doing with float. So what I'm about to do in this page is I'm going to float the home, news, contact, and about list items to the left. And what that will do is make them float in a line across the page rather than up and down. When I float, there is no more idea about 100% of the width of the parent anymore. So that's why they're going to go next to each other. Let's see what it looks like, and then we're going to have some problems that we'll need to fix. First of all, I'm going to go down to the bottom and make myself a rule for LI, because I'm floating all of the LIs to the left. And all I have to do is say float left. Now is when things start getting hairy. Save and refresh. Right direction, that's looking good. It understands that they should be floating. I've lost my salmon colored background. Why? Well, we start to understand why when we start mousing over both nav and UL. So look at that second number for nav and UL. Here's UL, 1059 by 0. If I go up and mouse over nav, it says 1059 by 0. So the nav and the UL think that they are 0 pixels high. Why do they think that? Because all of the LIs have floated away out of the UL. At the moment that they all float away, the UL thinks it has no children. Therefore, it thinks it has no content. Therefore, it thinks that its height should be 0 because it has no content. So I lose my salmon colored background. Poop. How do I fix it? Well, the overall problem is that the UL and the nav don't know about those LIs because they're floating. I'm going to show you a bunch of different ways, but first of all, in order for the UL to know about its children, it would have to be floating also. So let's do that for a moment. Float it to the left. Okay, now I'm going to mouse over this area, and it looks like now the UL understands that it's 18 pixels high. Great. But the nav still thinks it's 0 pixels high. Why? Because now the UL is floating, and it's the only thing in the nav. So the nav now needs to be fixed. This is such a huge pain in the butt, and that's why we're going to do something different ultimately, but I want you just to understand why what's happening is happening. So now the nav is floating left. Now we're in a heap of trouble because, of course, we don't want the nav to float left necessarily. We want to be able to do some other things with the nav. But you can see that its height has come back. So we have a multitude of problems here. I'm going to refresh to get myself back to my original problem. So there is another link in this week's content that talks about float and clear. It's the CSS tricks link, and it talks a little bit about the different ways of clearing your floats once you are done. And so what we're going to do is we're going to fix up this UL so that we can see the background color, and so that nothing else is going to try to float next to these LIs. So because these LIs are floating, if something else was floating below them on the page that could fit next to it, it would float up here on the right, and that's not what we want. So what I'm about to do is I'm about to apply a common clear fix to the UL. And here it is. We've given it to you at the top of the style sheet. So here is for fixing problems with floating elements. In this case, you can see that this looks somewhat familiar, hopefully. This does not look somewhat familiar, but what I'll tell you is this will insert some content after a thing that has the ClearFix class on it. This is a little bit gross and hacky, but welcome to CSS, which has a little bit of gross and hackiness to it. So in order to use this special fancy rule, I need to have something with a class of ClearFix on it. Let's try the UL, since it's the one that has all of its kids floating. So I already have a rule for UL and I have a rule for ClearFix. Let's make the UL adhere to the ClearFix by saying UL class equals ClearFix. So note to self, or to write into your notes right now, you're having trouble with all of the kids have floated away problem like we're having right now. This might be a good time to apply a ClearFix. This is also not the only way to create a horizontal nav bar. This just happens to be the way to do it using float. And so you're going to need to understand how to deal with some issues like this. All right, I'm going to save everything and refresh. And now I'm in a better spot. I do have a little bit of padding to clean up here, but not too bad. In the next video, we'll clean up the padding, and then we'll go down to the content area and do some more floating.